green. I think it's working. I'm a Yellow Pages man living in a Google world. All this new technology is sort of Greek to me. Thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate the presence of each one. I see had a wonderful afternoon over at Joe and Linda's. We had a great time, a lot of fun and fellowship and talking about the church and various things. And then tonight we went down to a steakhouse in a town called Lafayette. We have a town in Lafayette, or in Georgia, named Lafayette, about 15 miles from me, and they have several good restaurants as well. But I was over there with Tim and Connie and Lauren, and also with Joe and Linda, and with Glenn and Judy. Now, if I messed up some of those names, just forgive me. And I'm a work in progress. Be opening your Bible to Acts, the 17th chapter. Acts chapter 17. I am so blessed to be able to come and be a part of your summer series each year. At least I have for the last several years. And who knows, after the night, you may never invite me back again. But I've enjoyed each time that I've got to come. And what could I say more about this crew of young people sitting over here? I love you, and I appreciate you and your desire to sit down close to the front, setting an example for all of us here tonight. The lesson is entitled tonight, As I Passed By, I Beheld Your Devotions. Look with me in Acts chapter 17. Now, if you'll notice verse 15, Paul is waiting on Silas and Timothy. Then verse 16, now while Paul waited for them, Silas and Timothy, in Athens, his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. Therefore disputed he in the synagogue with the Jews and with the devout persons, and in the market daily with them that met with him. Then certain philosophers of the Epicureans and of the Stoics encountered him, and some said, What will this babbler say? Others, some, he seemeth to be a setter forth of strange gods, because he preached unto them Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him and brought him unto Areopagus, saying, May we know what this new doctrine whereof thou speakest is? For thou bringest certain strange things to our ears. We would know, therefore, what these things mean. For all the Athenians and strangers which were there spent their time in nothing else, but either to tell or to hear some new thing. Then Paul stood in the midst of Mars Hill and said, You men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are too superstitious. For as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I found an altar with this inscription, To the unknown God, whom therefore you ignorantly worship, him declare I unto you. As I passed by, Paul says, I beheld your devotions. And he made this statement in his sermon to the intellectuals in the city of Athens, Greece. Now, Paul was not impressed with the great number of idols that he saw, but he was stirred in his spirit over the spiritual poverty that he observed. To see all of this condition that existed in Athens was very painful for the Apostle Paul. And he beheld much. Notice how casually the text says, as I passed by. He beheld much just passing by. He saw their temples and their statues and their altars and their images. And much time and talent and energy and effort and money had been spent to erect these things. So thus they were called devotions. You see, that which we spend our time and energy and talent and money and effort to do, that's what we are devoted to. The satirist Protonius said that it was easier to find a god in Athens than a man. Well, then we ask the question, what could one man do in a city that was wholly, totally given over to idolatry. Well, on the one hand, he could view the stately edifices and take down copious notes so that he could lecture when he got back to Antioch. Or on the other hand, he could have reasoned, you know what? There's so much idolatry here, there's nobody going to listen. Or he also could have said, you know, that with all of this idolatry that is present here in this city, a person might get killed if he rocks the boat. So he could have said, you know what I'll do? I'll preach a little ear-tickling sermon. Choose the God of your choice. But not Paul. Not Paul. He preached the one true and living God among whom we live, move, and have our very being. And these highfalutin philosophers looked down their noses from their elevated perches on the Apostle Paul, and verse 18 says, they saw a babbler. What will this babbler say? Now, folks, a babbler in the original word means a little seed picker. And so it's a little bird that goes about picking a crumb or two off from an abundant loaf. And so they viewed Paul as one who had gained a crumb of knowledge here and a crumb of knowledge there. And he was going about and spouting those things forth as though they were his. And in all of this, they saw an opportunity to feed their own curiosities. For verse 21 says, all they that were gathered there, they were there for the purpose of either hearing or telling some new thing. And their ignorance can be readily seen in the fact that they mistook the word resurrection as a term of deity. In verse number 18, and it's to these intellectuals Paul chose the subject of ignorance. This unknown God whom you ignorantly worship, him declare I unto you. Now this was an appropriate subject for these dignified men of higher learning. They'd accumulated a lot of ignorance on their course of their lifetime. And after proclaiming the one true God who gives life, breath, and all things, verse 32 says, some mocked. And others gave the old excuse, oh, Paul, we'll hear thee again on this matter. And so the sermon was almost totally rejected. There's no record of a congregation ever existing there. There's no record of Paul or any other apostle, for that matter, ever returning there. So maybe the old maxim is true, that all should have the right to hear the gospel once before anyone has the right to turn it down or to spurn it twice. But I don't want to spend all of our time tonight asking or discussing what Paul saw in Athens. I want to bring it home to us. If Paul passed through the coast of America today, what would he behold? Remember, our devotions are what we spend our time, our energy, our effort, and our talent, and our money toward the doing of. I believe Paul, if he passed through America today, number one, I believe he would say, as he beheld our devotions, I believe he would say, I have beheld your literature, your language, and your music. Your music is lewd, your literature is base, and your language is coarse. How did we get here? Within God we trust, on our money, and the only acceptable way in our society today to use the name of God is in vain. And whatever is too vulgar to say in normal conversation, somehow, if you set it to music, you can put it on the radio, and now it is okay. Paul would say, I observe there are cheap paperback books and ungodly magazines that extol worldly pleasures and stir up the base passions of men. And I observe that there's no money left for wholesome books and for gospel papers that can build the spirit within a man. And I observe that pornography of the airwaves could be heard throughout the house. Expensive television sets with tapes and records that glorify adultery, homosexuality, and justify sinful relationships. And I believe Paul would observe there are very few spiritual conversations that are taking place, especially on the dance floor. And I believe that he would observe that there's not many prayers being offered around the bar rooms, not many conversions taking place on the beach fronts. And I believe he would observe a double standard. When dad and mom think they can drink whatever, watch whatever, say whatever, and do whatever, and somehow the kids are not going to be affected. Look, I've worked on several liquor referendums to keep it out of our county. But I'm first and foremost, while I'm for getting alcohol off of our shelves, let's first get it out of Dad's refrigerator. I'm for getting pornography off of the shelves down there at the store. But first, let's get it from Dad, beneath Dad's recliner. I believe Paul would say, I observe your music and your literature and your language. Number two, as Paul passed through the coast of America today and beheld our devotions, I believe he would say that America is devoted to materialism. And we had to have the most modern of everything, from furniture to automobiles to the latest fashion and sexy clothing. And for many, the idea of poverty is only a 46-inch smart television. And I observed that you chose to work overtime pay or overtime when you didn't have to, and you missed worship services for double time pay. Ladies and gentlemen, no amount of riches can atone for poverty of character. New Testament Christians were characterized by poverty and by power, and today's Christian, they are paralyzed by wealth and by weakness. Over there in Matthew 6, beginning in verse 19, Jesus said, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust doeth corrupt, where thieves break through and steal, but lay them up in heaven, where there is no moth, there is no rust, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Over there in Matthew 6:33 said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God." Paul said in Colossians 3, beginning in verse 1, "If ye then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above. For you are dead, and your life is hid with God in Christ. Set your affections on things above." The poet said, "Out of this life I'm unable to take things of silver and gold that I make. All that I cherish and all that I keep, I must leave behind when I fall asleep. And I've often wondered what I shall own in that other world where I go alone. What shall they say and what shall they see? And the soul that answers the call for me? Will the great judge come in when my task is through, my spirit for gaining some riches too? Or at the last shall it be mine to find all that I've worked for, I've left behind? Alexander the Great conquered the known world by age 30 and wept because there were no more worlds to conquer. By age 33, he's in a coffin. Before he died, he made a request to those who would be caring for him after his demise. They said, "Bury me with my hands sticking outside of my coffin." And when asked why, he said, "So they can see a man who had it all and see a man who left it all." We're not going to take any of it with us. The only thing we're going to have up there is what we send before we leave this earth. Number three, as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I observed that America become a nation of sports fanatics. And it is no exaggeration, is it? America has spent a fortune on sports. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot elevate sports to the place that belongs to God. I mean, we have time sometimes to play 10,000 hours of ball a week, but can't go to church to spend a couple of 3 hours. And so we cannot give ball, ball can become Baal. So it's no exaggeration we have done that. And at times people miss the worship services of the church to attend sporting events. And I believe Paul, when he passed through the coast of America, would say, I observed that you could sit out in the rain with 90,000 hypocrites, but couldn't go to church because of a few. And I observed that your heart rejoiced when a 3-hour game went into overtime, yet you found yourself too busy to sit through an hour of worship. Sports fanatics show up for their 1 hour a week churching to be entertained and not long detained. They have just enough religion to be miserable. Too much to be happy at the prom dance. Too little to be happy at the prayer meeting. And I believe Paul would observe you could memorize all of the essentials. I mean, you knew all the latest statistics. You knew everyone's jersey number. And you did that for multiple sports. And you knew who was on the injured list. You knew the starting lineup. You knew the positions that people play. You knew the batting order. But when it came to learning Scripture, you, quote, had a bad memory. Psalm 119, beginning in verse 9, wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his way? By taking heed thereto according to thy word. With my whole heart have I sought thee. Oh, let me not wander from thy commandments. Thy word have I hidden in mine heart. This right here has zero to do with your religion. The Bible heart is right here at your mind. Thy word have I hidden in mine heart, that I might not sin against thee. Then verse 130 of that 119th Psalm, the entrance of thy word giveth light. Paul asks a question or makes a statement in 2 Timothy 3 verses 4 and 5. Let me ask, can we become lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God? I believe if Paul passed through the coast of America today, I believe he would observe that America has become devoted to immorality. Look, we've let Hollywood establish too many principles in our life. Make no mistake, Hollywood is as immoral as a sow in deep mud. And we can't look to Hollywood for what we need to be doing and practicing in this nation, especially in the church of the Lord Jesus Christ. We are being spoon-fed homosexuality today. In Leviticus 18, verse 22, Moses said that it is an abomination when a man lies with a man as he does with a woman. An abomination, an odious, hateful thing in the very eyes of God. Leviticus 20, verse 13, makes the same statement, but the penalty is given. It's an abomination when a man lies with a man as he does with a woman, and they shall both be stoned to death. I am not advocating killing homosexuals. I am advocating God's attitude toward the sin. You remember back in the Old Testament, a man picked up sticks, he died instantly. When a man broke God's law, he was punished instantly. All of that wrath now, all of that anger of God towards sin is being reserved. It's being built up, if you will. And one day, God's going to look down here and say, you know what? I've had me enough. I've got a gut full of your rebellion. And God will do that, and God will bring this world to an end. You ever read Romans 1, 26 and 27? Says that when a man lies with a man, he leaves the natural use of the woman, burns in his lust, and goes to the unnatural use of a man. He commits this sin of homosexuality. Paul says that it is against nature. Well, if it's against nature, you know what that means? It's an unnatural act. I can prove to you that the Garden of Eden was heterosexual. God made Adam a man and Eve a woman, and he placed them in that arrangement, and he told them to be fruitful and to multiply. Homosexuals can't multiply. All they can do is recruit. And I'm not your enemy when I tell you the truth. And so Adam and Eve were placed. I was preaching on this a few months ago and sort of got wound up, and I made this statement. What did God do? commit Adam and Steve and go ahead and put them in a big closet somewhere and leave them there for thousands of years? No. One man, one woman, one lifetime, one exception, and that's it. And the man doesn't live that can deny that successfully. The Garden of Eden was heterosexual. There is a man and a woman, and they were to come together as man and wife. And it's interesting to note, Genesis 5, verse 2, that man did not live one 24-hour period until God performed their wedding. It says, in the same day that God created them, He called their name Adam. Eve's name was literally Eve Adam. And so Genesis 5 verse 2, they didn't live one complete day separate and apart from the family arrangement. A second grave sin of America today. And this is not about politics. I could care less about politics. You look at the word and it ought to turn you off. Poly means many and a tick's a bloodsucker. So that's what many bloodsuckers, that's what they are. But there are political people today that fight for homosexuality. There are people in politics today that fight for abortion. Matthew 7 verse 12, whatsoever therefore you would that men should do to you, do you even so to them, for this is the law and the prophets. I will not get into the various methods that people use to take the life of a little baby. But I'll tell you this, one thing that we have done to expedite that and to not curtail it in our society is we have adopted the language of the feminist. Pray God tell me what is a fetus. It's a baby. Let's call it what it is. Let's call it what the Bible calls it. Let's call it what God calls it, a fetus. And sometimes we use language like that so that we can sound so intellectual and so educated. It's a baby. Back in the Old Testament, there was babies that were born. And John the Baptist came into the world as a baby. Jesus came into the world as a baby, not a fetus. It sounds a whole lot different to say I threw a fetus in the trash heap than I threw a baby in the trash heap. 1.5 million abortions annually in the good old U.S. of A. In a nation that prides itself upon the fact of in God we trust. Ladies and gentlemen, we as a nation haven't trusted in God for a long time. 60 million babies are murdered by abortion throughout the world annually. The most dangerous place in all of the world to live is the mother's womb. It would be safer tonight for you to drape yourself in an American flag and walk down the streets of Beirut. Every 20 seconds, the womb is invaded and a murder takes place. What if you were looking to buy a new house? Man, you got cash dollars. You're ready to buy a new house. So you get with a realtor and she begins to show you, and she takes you to some of the most beautiful neighborhoods. And there's this one neighborhood you just love. Got the most gorgeous house that you have ever seen in that neighborhood. You got the money for it. And she says, well, the only problem is every 20 seconds a door is kicked in and a murder takes place in this neighborhood. You want to live there? You want to buy that place? No. But that's exactly what happens. 180 babies have been murdered since I stepped into this pulpit tonight and said good evening. And if we can figure out a couple of things, we'll know what's right and what's wrong relative to abortion. I don't see a clock and I don't have a watch, so somebody's going to have to stop me. I'll hear a buzzer. I don't hear buzzers well, so I'm warning you. Especially second and third and fourth one. If we can figure out two things, that is, where does life come from? Who has the right to give life? Secondly, who has the right to take it? Acts 17, verse 25. God gives to all life, breath, and all things. Life comes from God. You remember when Joseph, his brothers, they've sold him into Egyptian slavery, and he rises up to the second in command. A famine hits. Joseph's brothers go down there, and when they recognize that Joseph has recognized them, they are quaking and shaking in their boots, and they say, he's going to take vengeance on us. What does Joseph say? Genesis 50, verses 15 through 19, am I in the place of God? Ladies and gentlemen, God, and God alone, has the right to give life, and God alone has the right to take it. Romans 13:9, Paul says, thou shalt not commit murder. Literally, thou shalt not kill, King James, but it's thou shalt not commit murder. A second thing we need to ask, not only who gives life and who has the right to take it, but what kind of life is it? You remember Genesis establishes a principle. Every seed does what? Produces after its own kind, right? Well, a baby is the product of two human beings. What is it? Is it a dog? Is it a cat? Is it a kangaroo? No, every seed produces after its own kind. And so it's a living human being. Then we must ask, is it innocent? What crime has it committed? If it's not innocent, what has it done? And so we have a political party today, and I am not into politics, okay? But I am into morals. And we have a party today that coddles the criminal and wants to murder the baby. Now, is that not right? What's wrong with that? Everything's wrong with it. So is it an innocent life? We need to ask that question. And if it is innocent, we need to stand up for it. That political party of which I speak is as amoral as any other thing that's ever existed in any society, any godless society in the history of the world. They don't even know which restroom to use, or if they're boys or girls. In Virginia, the governor said, what we'll do is we'll deliver the baby, and we'll keep the baby comfortable, and then what we'll do is we'll go talk to the mother and see if she wants the baby to live or not. Life begins at conception, not in the ride home in the car. And that's what we need to understand. But somebody says, but preacher, what about rape and incest cases? I want to be very tender and very kind just here. I can't think of anything that would be more traumatic, that would be more devastating than the subject of rape. How traumatic that must be. But do you realize that that argument is no matter how traumatic it might be, and I pray to God nobody in this assembly has ever had to suffer from that. But it's a smoke screen. We just have to say what it is. It's a smoke screen. That rape cases where an abortion takes place makes up less than 0.5% of all of the abortions. So if we just did the rape incest cases, there'd be less than 750 abortions per year. It would go from 1.5 million down to less than 750. And by the way, I'm not a doctor, a nurse. I'm not even the son of a doctor. But I hear that there is a procedure that can be done if you get to the doctor's office or to the hospital that can stop life from beginning. But somebody says, but preacher, what about to save the mother's life? A doctor is sworn by his own Hippocratic oath to save both lives, is he not? He has got to work to save both lives. But it might be a situation to where he can't. Kind of like if a doctor comes upon an accident out here in the highway. Here's two people sprawled out can I say sprawled? They're laid out in the street, and he's got to make a choice. He has sworn by his own oath to do all that he can to save both of them. But it might be a situation to where he can't save both. And he'll have to make a choice as to which one he's going to save. And so at that time, I submit to you, it leaves the moral realm and becomes a medical question. He has got to do all that he can to save both mother and this unborn child. He's got to do all that he can to save both of those people laying in the street. But it might be a situation to where he cannot. Promiscuity. 3/4 of all of the abortions in the United States of America, I don't know about the entire world, but in the United States, 3/4, that is 1,125,000, 1.125 million of the abortions that take place, unwed teenagers. Unwed teenagers. That's really a sad statistic. Sex education is taught too young in school and from the wrong base. I believe that our government has set upon a course to kill our young people. And here's why. Back home, I'm not sure about in Tennessee, back home years ago, a kid, when they reached the age of 12 years old, a young lady or a young man could go down to the health department and get free condoms. Now, I want to speak pretty plain just here. I'm going to keep this discussion on the proper level, but let me speak pretty plain. If a sperm can pass through the wall of a condom, pray God tell me why an AIDS virus can't when it's 1,000 times smaller. What if, and it's a proven fact, they're only 75% safe. What if I were to tell you tonight, I'm going to take 100 of you, and we're going to go to Hawaii, 5-star hotels. We're going to do the shopping thing. We're going to eat in 5-star restaurants. I'm picking, now that'll be a lie, I'm picking up the tab, I'd tell you. Don't take me serious, we're not doing that. But I'm picking up the tab. How many people want to go? Man, hands would raise up all over, right? But what if I were to tell you the plane's going to crash, 25 of you are going to die. Don't know which 25 it's going to be. The plane will crash, 25, only 75% are going to make it onto Hawaii. How many people want to go now? And yet, we know statistics bear out that fact about the safety of a condom. Young ladies, if some two-legged hormone hurricane comes to you with the urge to merge and tries to get you to sacrifice your virginity or to otherwise give him your body to somehow prove your love to him, you slap his face until his ears ring like chapel bells on a cold Sunday morning. And you bring him down here to Tim, and Tim will slap him for you. Take him home to your dad. Say, Dad, this is what this boy wanted to do. He needs slapping. We can't allow this kind of thing to continue on. Young ladies, young men, there are no double standards. Young men, it's just as important for you to be a virgin when you come to the marriage altar as it is for the young lady. And I want to say to both sexes, you do not have the right to give to someone else what belongs to your future mate. You don't have that right. You come to the marriage altar and you come pure and you live within that relationship in a monogamous way, and you'll never have to worry about dying with an emaciated skeleton in an AIDS ward. You live right. You be pure. Safe sex is to save sex until you're married. Nextly, as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I think Paul would say, I observe many evils. There's no honesty in relationships. What we're being told today, and it started 25 years ago, maybe Glenn may know it, maybe even before that. I'm such a baby. 25 years ago at least, where we're told that, well, adultery is not a sexual sin. Adultery is just word breaking. We were told that. So all you got to do, if you've had a dozen or 100 divorces, just make God a promise that you're not going to break your word anymore, and you'll be all right. Friends, what about honesty in our relationships? Little Johnny got a note home from school. Little Johnny has told a lie. The mama got little Johnny and set him down in a chair. She got that big long finger out, and she is pointing at little Johnny's face. Little Johnny, if you ever tell another lie, a big green monster with flashing eyes and horns and fangs a foot long is going to come and carry you away and never bring you back. You ever going to tell another lie, little Johnny? He said, no, ma'am, you can tell them a whole lot better than I can. And sometimes we punish our children for lying. Just after the doorbell rings, Mama takes off through the back of the house, tell them I'm not here. The phone rings, Dad says, get that boy, tell him I'm not here. And punish them for cheating just after we bragged about how we cheated Uncle Sam on our income tax, and spank them for stealing while we dry our hands on the towel we got at the last motel where we stayed. We need to have honesty in our relationships. And I believe Paul would say, I observe many other evils. A liquor store on every corner, theaters with no G-rated movies, magazine stands filled with pornography, night spots that glorify sex and nudity. And juxtaposed against them, you see the church buildings. There they stand, these stately edifices, where emphasis is placed upon pleasing men and not God. And there they stand, church-sponsored entertainment where money is wasted in competition one with another to see who can offer the most. Worship services that differ little from carnivals or entertainment programs where bands and sports figures are brought in while the people continue to practice slapstick religion. And the emphasis is upon numbers, that is, quantity, and not spirit and in truth, which is quality. And so what does the world behold? What does it behold? When the world looks into what we're devoted to, what do they see? Is Christianity attractive to them? Or are they unable to tell any difference between us and them? Remember in Exodus 11, verse 7? Moses said, God hath put a difference between thee and Israel. And you know what? That difference, Israel's salvation hinged on that difference. The Lord has put a difference between the church and the world, and our salvation hinges upon that difference. So is Christianity attractive, or can they not tell any difference? In the way that we entertain ourselves, by the way that we dress ourselves, by the way we talk, and the subjects that turn us on. The world will think, look at 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 4. I want you to know one more time I can read. We're going to read this verse. The world's going to think that real Christians are strange. Wherein they, that's the heathen that they used to run with before they were converted. Wherein they think it strange that ye, you newly converted Christians, run not with them to the same excess of riot. And what do? When you no longer go to the places, you no longer talk the way they did, you no longer dress the way they did, you no longer do the things that you did in the pre-converted state, they begin to call you goody-goody two-shoes. You're a sissy, you're tied to your mama's apron, you're tied to your daddy's ways, and they begin to talk about you and laugh at you and mock at you. Peter said they count it strange that a change has taken place in your life. Can it be said of your house that it's easier to find a God than a man? Will the day ever come in America when the intellectuals will sit upon their elevated perches and call faithful gospel preachers a babbler? No, no, no. It's already here. Will the time come in America when the gospel preacher will be regarded as a setter forth of strange gods? No, no, no. It's already here. Look with me in 1 Corinthians 8, and the lesson is yours. Can I have 2 minutes? 1 minute. 1 minute. One quick minute. 1 Corinthians 8. Notice verse 5 and 6. For though there be that are called, now notice, little lowercase gods, whether in heaven or earth, there be gods, lowercase many, and lords, lowercase many. But unto us there is but one, capital G God, the Father of whom are all things, and we in him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, uppercase, capital uppercase, by whom are all things, and we by him. Ladies and gentlemen, we have everything we need to get from here to heaven. We have it all. Let's take advantage of what God has done for us. You've been so wonderful tonight.